nani nemchi senge tene di sul di kong senge and the sul head di and the seju nemchi kan subtu in tabi sushi hapa mixegi and the sushi where di kong disungani and the Linyasan Royal kung disung kalung adu di bersiju yenchi kandi kenzin hands of the chumbre tene and the bersiju yenchi kan and mingi maju benyel yenchi kandi disung di yela samtikre tin du and kung disung kalung tone and nimeti tundu di uji namti nim tabne susi shuni tene and City Memshi can Danish Huber, Mr. Obi, Bishop Obi Gandon, Bishop Christian Burma, the Danish Huber, Kisunjan, the Jew Namta, in a color Namti, in Cabinet Sushi Shubini, the mixing Sushi Shubuati, and the Jola University, and the PhD. Non-Sabbath, non-Shimba, and the Kundasum Yamshib Sumyu, and then the Yamshikangi, and the Kingset Trimbuti, Honam to Yamshi, Jabati, Manzuma, Deshet, Nanga Pebti, to Shishuin, Yamashi, and the Sumbuti, Sokoya, the Mimi Floti, and the Pebti Yamshikangi, Yamshibata. Then Hapa and the PhD Nanyegi and Yamshiba, set of Nanyegi, Konnabusola, and Yamshiba, Konnabusola, Yamshib Javati, some Chilenchiagi, she Tingitic, Tribequin, the Tontul Pena. Samalor, the Honam to Yamshi, Nambati, Madisha, the Gumbata, Yamshi, Tunge, the Nam to Tenche, Cube to the Nam to numbers of the Tuvan Reality, the team under the Tangaret, the Nam to Shukware, see to the team under the Hong Kesum Parliament. And the fellow town narrow enough
Pege Siju Nyamshi Kangi Kenzinda Nyamshiba Legend number the Chit Dendishuve Page Tola Chig Tunanda Page Troponingba Lomambudula Pepata Teva Chumba Kusho Tenden Chodan Alhabadui Pyotajana Tola Lomambudula Chalegi Tone Nyamshita Sikto Nani Angara Kirki Troponingba Kusho Kushan Wama Tari Siji Nyamshikangi Changa Dendishu De Pepatang Anti Tola Tanda Kensington Kanamanashi JNU Delhi University Tabaki Pumramba Nyamshiba number so Changa Dendishu Dendes Cheje Siju Nyamshikangi Nyamshiba number ta Anipatsu Samju Kotoda Dolenayaki Kokaptu Dendes Namda Ani Nyamshi Lewongi Leja Mangu Shibuji Yebe Nane and Lord Nala Nimachik Chebe Sonto Chik Suegi Leja Che Yobarich Kopjetine Segito Antitola Tarte Leje Shumbai Kach Peshala Number Samala Samtishui Kashangone Narake Mone Don Sambela Kangan Nanare Nakeste Sonto Tari Josum Lay Chukji Konjegi Tola Keji Shera Shosungdo 남부 상에 킹그라가 가 주요가 상마가 진정 레게 돌라 다데베기 레제지레마도 텐제기 냠시 지역이 소수계기 인여버 있네 도난다 냠시 지역이 고갑 쇼제 텐제 중요 말에 제장 넘버즈데 리지강진 체제 야나다 벽이 내주 돌라 냠시 지역이 난신배 남시 제신부터 지 도공공 투베라고 믹세슈 투베라보다 게 가부레 생것도 돼 이내다 삼빌라지네 랍데간에 도림 랍데간에 뭐시 서로 차 안돼 흉샤벨로 망고치냠도 대자 안지네 수준냠 식한기 겐질란조기 총무르진도디 맨 자투면도 세제 슈마니베 서로 체선 제자 안타란데스제 자비 강 슈브디 가샤키 공바당 슝기 시주라고 근데 가야매 아니 나랑 강 템버디 냠시 톨라 남구 따당 여대바다디 나랑 길기 섬주로 부셔 근데 시제 쉐 시주 냠시 강 단대 뭐보다 민디 마제 코네 로망고 쉬우치 대순레올라 데브레 아니 데브레 레운데 열에데 단단 난신 제제 돌랭 총도 좋아했다 아니지 총도 현다 나라 파 냠슈 자리했다 아니 양시양시한테 봐 송시한 거 제제 년주 쉬어기 고갑로부터 텐제기 tunje라고 견디 주마도 그래 디 마도바 선장 가샤 사바 페바다가 다 흉라 천댕기 냠시강지 과에디 고고 싶지도 제장 안티 돌아가도 남베갑라 안시주 냠시강 민당 오버 템비 주가 당베 돈네 다 로가지 예바 체브레 디 돈네 두저망부치 여마레때 다 데벨로 숨시 나로라 야타제 총송 삼버르지 돌라 아니야 릭직 소스 삼로 나라 여버디 안주고데 마니스 슈나 삼버르지 진짜지 챙겨도 다 냠시 지에디 개침을 쉬부지 지속의 내주 가리 있네요 알하바도에 나란조 단대 내법디 나라 표미리기 내당 계급기 내당 아니지 수술 롱바 정월라 집에 내당 토네 아니 벼당 야나기 내주 토라 대배장 아니 직지성부 체제 도난난과에다 냠시난과에 긴냥가데 내가 침부 쉬부지를 상고요 냠시 제랑기 레동기 직거바다디 개침부 임부지 개침부 잠마세베 단대 두저나라 고고 침부 임부지 문제 휴대기요 근데 토라 냠시바 시드점바 차겐럽지 가리고 그래 맞아 소수지 망시 돈에 시용기 내제 야부여바 강실라 내주 간다 강리 있나양 도난다 냠시지 인여과디 데스 개침부럽지 다 소수 따주 디레 레드 가연 로마직라 레고 잡베깔라 도난다 인 매베이나 델로토바 페이마레 재산 디기 인단 도난 매베이나 14부터 파게 따야기 룽아부 제제 따야기 레가디 시라 연구 말에 삼삼라버지 근데 챙기요 재장 지 냠시번 넘버즈 뒤중기 따미 검시 나를 자고야디 지 뉴고다 대 제맥이 토네 내주 춘추지를 고급 맵에 있네 들람산 제도 잡고야다 제장체 아니지 유림카가 나라 차바다 두즈 나라 내주 춘추지 여배 있네 소소랑기 냠시 지역이 대제 임바이나 디 제도 제자람산 야제 아니 지 림베 제자 따고야다 고 14보다 육생제 내가 제과지 임바지 문제 지게라 디체 마도바 있나 아니 지 내주지 거대교래 통대교래 카야야야야야 나라 창면 현대바 강실라 디기 갑종다 되게 내가 가르쳐 그래 안틀라 예시브로 가르치래 도저 상마양 하대 얘기 내당 서로 근데 저그래서 모두 주도 냠시반 남아 단대 제용도 좀 상마 공로 시험 샤더래샤 결혼절 들름 텐데 친구 열에 생고도 주도 냠시 주도 좀 공에 시라 열에 즉 대서 차쟁기 내게 서로 제제 냠나로 붙는데 레시그레데 대 인당 토난지 레비이나 내주 사바 총사질레 매비네디 그래서 그래 개침불라 통제 시과야당 소수냠시 주제나라 구두체 투별라 그보다 또 친구 열애성 제장디 냠시버 수도점바 안능아 지 첩시바 난신 제제 등제 강을 던제 고가비절라 던줘야 되는데 말이 아니 레버트제 등자 구두체세 나라 주제 아니 냠숙 제과 당 돌링 제과에 딜라 제두르 제과기 임바 인도 잠바디 미창매기 용토베지다 레라버지 말에 섬겨 제장디 육생제 제과에 당디 개침부를 섬겨 다 튼제게 돈에 차샤바이나 제단 페미티족이 튼제 상고시라 말에데 지 냠시 지역이 전배 돌라 다 미자 당하고 개요 말에데 철천비 든주 던랑 제치랑 전나 튼제시라 잡치어래 말한 챙기도 든주 던랑 나라 흉샵 제제야 주베갑라 아니 변나로라 다 링네사제다 튼제기 두갑 죽딜라 마딜라기 내단 임베갑라 배티 까르제 낙제 서로지 레데두 자나기 내주 시라고 주메바 하바도에 변난기 내주디 대배장 군부 시부치 인도점바 지 아주 첨바든데 열에 냠지기 아니 비징 레디오다 해서 레디오도서 지 거기에 내면에 우주 잡제 배티 년제 디마 팝제 깔래 시부치 잡제 디 내주 때제 아니 거간내마 벽이 내주 간다 따야로 같은데 열에 파일만 거 단대대 손레고나 하대샤 삼사를 전주 다 텐제기 내법도 정말 저제 따대샤 아니 튼제 상고 쉬우지 차대도 지네 자나 코로나 중에 계지 나라야 통고도 잠바 내주 망고 쉬우지 마점 용도 최동안에 규자 제과에 내주 망고 쉬우지 여바 강실라 아니 아직 냠시랑래 편도 전부 여대베 내주 샤츠알 망고 쉬우지 흉제레 흉제 매매 결람레 아니 내주 망고 쉬우지 된대거라 다 말래 남바 좀 망아시 두거래 생고도 저 장디 저도 잠바 지 발람 차자레 지 결람 카나라 내주 통야다 익자 통야도 대비나 다 가서 칸에 오주 여대바 다 초조 여바 자나 쌈마세베 치제기 자나라 따년기 도저히 답되고 싶으지 전에 다른 살을 때네 따주여베기 내당지 임부 인도 잠바 튼젠당 코리오디 시부지 야구치 차대샤 삼브럽치 디기 돈네 넘버 조직 투난치 넘버 이나 랑신기 내주 돌라지 케바 베티 차마도베 이네 켈레바 뭐네 표도 중과지 차야라 대존매 대베 소르지 된제기 고갑다 튼제 티샤 여대베 인도 도저 돌라 넘버 좀 내버도 토난다 된난거에 지레샤 아니 다 냠시 제백이 미규다 좁된 거받아서 내주 가리용도 제바치에 잠도 마세베 내주 디기 마음발라 내당 컨트리처 그래 갑자기 가봐도 그래 그래서래 냠시 제 개체부르데 디 강라 하바도의 개체디 제바치에들의 성위에 제시 제마도베 있나 내주 망고 여베 있네 배마도 같이 자디 그래 제장 제바치에다디 개침부 지 인바인도 잠바도 저 돌라 미제라고 송제 소소 제바디 내주 용다 마용 솜니레 용바에 용식그래 마용바에 용식그래 직다 모르 마선나 직 틱바에 용식그래 마틱바에 용식그래 디개요 말했은 것도 미스 창맥이 남저 마자다 삼로 당당기 삼려 코르게디 마자바 인도 잠바 소수 삼로디 파 뽕바 예나 대야 미션다기 섬주지 지용규 여베 인도 디제돌 체라 팽그레 디톤이 야제 줘야당 아니 그 처럼마서나 틱제 탐매지 인구럽지 마 밥이 용대 잠바 칼라강잠 처바 제투베르지 다 대베 지금 마원베 롱압주 축주 든주기 내당다 진짜기 처바체 마도베 이네 용주 예외기 로주정에 내주강라 철tem비 진짜지 용사자와 삼모럽지 근데 샤투베로 근데 용구를 했은 것도 제반낭 투베이나 그래서 빼면서 개침을 했은 것도 다 냠시 지역이 내던시네 민도 리우저부디 당가서 용자기 단다 배바죠 배미리디 탑주 제신백이 미리지 임배찬에 자자기 내주 답변나라 좀이 톱당기 대시 코리오 도시 벤조기 직종 매바 다 대다 대자배 장능기 두저달라 미창매 도난로부터 제든이 레디기 어레 코리오다 진짜기 내다 망부지기 돈네 그래서 랑신기 도난 레과야지다 냠시바지기 미숙간에 냠시 마체베이네 표바지 임배찬에 도난 제과에 내다지 시제레 이나야 뒤 당기 말했은 것도 남아서 다른 게 제림나라 제베갑라 단다지 봄람밭 남아서 진짜기 조시 돌라 지좀 다마 림베제 송셰 년주슈야 임배인도 그래서 두번 수요보다 뒤된데 연구를 섬산하지 챙겨요. 지금바 뒤즈 내당자 마임배 대면배기 지 대세 그래서 그래 subject마서나 갈래카고 임바당 내주지 중공다 답대보면에 내주 배차샤나 다 대별로 tuk주라 장디 표 개미 전송 체제 정원을 추대요래 말한주 전주 나라 여대부터 미통부로 렉스지레 자지 망조 망아디 변나려요래 뒤즈기 지 미삼르 도시나라 이말을 곰시시네면도 도시디 교바라고 가르치고요래 가르 토라 교바주고요래 롭소다 시행기 망시디 자나 공정기 따베 돈에 시자지 주제 제대요래 언디 갑조달마 티투요래 정말 도투요래 대다 초중배 김상 매력물에 내단기 춥자리 삼로 단조리 두저 지속기 지 내밥 돌래 교바라고 근데스 용고도 다디 변나래 따주야 되바 말한 전조나래 따주야 되베 내당 망부치 열에 생고도 다 배전으로 시나 단다 수직이 냠시 돌아 도나 만나야 시내면도 두저 데스케 충으로 지제 야지 무슨 도부제자 마용에 진짜기 내버로 진짜 카시카시 통도 학과도의 신조 사고기 내다 벽이 내법디 벽계지 미망 사회 초여세디 망한디 종계난 내요 말 망체 신조 사고난 내대 신조 사고기 초바다 니리 줄람다 미도시에다 삼로단조디 나저기 야부지 또 마도바다 디 임바이나 마음배 원바 치에다 내주 갑조 가와도도 다저저 돌아 저바체 데스 카부르 지르와 다발람 조사 망부시부지 종제나라 뼈에다 tinde기 내주 돌아 도나 사발레제 대샤님시 나심버레데 이나야 지용기 두조 정말배 짜고라고 땅에기 수주두주 돌아 영아주 14제제 따고 얘기 내단다 tin데 메조 삼버를 땅아래디 다조 돈에 tin데르지 통대기요 님시기 지 코리옥스네 민도 subject부터 시부지 야침부르자 내도 충중지 강라 냠시 탈침부지 난토비이나 시부지 편도 여버당 근데 인도선부터 저달라 지 하바드에다 대여 대베 냠시 레옹기 냠시바 남버저 지 리지 강제 나제 내도 제잡에 돌라 강시제 냠시 난거야기 내당로부터 데스케 침부를 섬사를 챙겨요 나랑기 지 통제럽 지 시비나다 지 대배 멜로다 투주지 심조가래 자나기 변날 전송체제 자나다 베디 로주톤에 짐제 계급제대 안 제바디에다 망부시부지 제바 사보에 중요하래 제바지 글쎄 그래 tumbo 야고에 중요하래 갑갈라 마자베 내주에 중요하래 타나 다 공전 란제 십시하고 줄라 안다 그 차상 직전 송치에기 야제기 삼로디 군대 말레 관에 자나케 나레 숙천부 여대버지 레데 아니 자나 나라 군대 람베 조글라 안표 차상 직전 송치에기 미국 정부 시송 된대와라 다 취치 단다 내당 다 자차보다 양하고 직체 년장기 내당 된대지 나라 여대도 잠바 지 강지톤에 다 교부시부 치어와 고려래 즉 조전 돈에는 원에 할레베 다 조전 제여로 뭐 내주디 캐는 거야 내법지로 봐. 다 있나야 교부 매버지 다 레송 표베 교부 매버지 가리어스나 배미리기 장배 도시에다 삼르 대초다 소스 미리기 콤시다 지 뒤균진체라 다 미도로 마투마 조디요레 안자나기 수주 나네 통마 장내 제제 표전 수주도 우리 좀으로 단제 할람 배버스도 민 자면 매봐 소액이 내법 난 예자라 미지토죠 자나콜라 냠시 제대니지 티 땡아촌은 고만 용변내죠 간자이나 된데다 덴바이 아이나 삼을 소설로요레 마숑 아이네지지 가르치기도 쓰나 땡아 변나랑압중 마장네 변나라다 전주의 제발 갑라 자나기 개바 망부시우지 소정 제로와 당보 매도 살시에서 가르쳐 두줄 랭귀 나네 타면 두 상마자면 셔버와 어째 동기 진제기 레림지게 나라 자나기 개바 망부시우지게 돈에 섬주 뒤제 배변내주 돌아 가르치고 위면라 주디 개바 망부시우지게 결기 섬주 나라 마우체동 랑라 결기 섬주 표시하베 나라 표바스도 잠바 메레디 슈메 짬에 땅거렸어 마도 카시알 하바 이네디 롤랑 자에게 내주 차그래 마웅발라 지소나라 대부 연구 말했어 제 티샤스다 이제도 티샤 냠시바다 제여 레스니즈기 통대야기 이제 나라 통구도 없지 그러면서 디스기도 다 할래고 해러디 이네디 투비야 말봐 디 마도베 간라 다 단데 페미리기지 네버브로데 컨데지요레 내단 교바시부치요레데 소소 미리기 라자셴고시네 민도 페미리기지 도시진단시네 민도 아니 지 초다리숑 콤시기 지 균진치에시네 민도 할래고에기 다지 닝덥 침병 안에 큐네랑 로디 공화도가 제제다 대별로 납주 축주 나로라 간다디 강에 차대여로 한 시주라 차샤비는 독습 제여래 전부 제제 고향 땅제 제여래 벤조 제제 록동 제제 국투백이 내주 제여래 다 간다 시주 점수 말규 가리 임바이네 간다 표미 삼로디 자나초라 공마도베 내단치 차대베 여비 인도 잠바 띵아주 창매기 도난 제과했다 디지 원내 장내 지 리주 샤베서라고 학삼도서 다 맞아이 침부시부지를 했음고도 베미리기 탑수버지기 뭐니 셰브이나 타이나 냠시버스긴디 소소 삼로 땅에디 자나라 땅위에 자나데 자임베 도시에 돈에 마대베 체제 소소 냠시버지 임베 전에 초수 말롱에 답에 돈에 따고 해야지 내가 침부를 했음고도 냠시 제베 죽던디 시숑직당 직조직이 시주당 마든베 내저 용식레데 냠시레 냠시 제베 죽던디 점수면 봤던 과지레마도 냠시 제베 죽던디 시숑디 가보 용사레 삼버지 죽던지 때 용부 있나 대카요라 여기 편도 연구 아마레 생고도 지도 잠바 지 야니 가리요메 있네디 제바랑 제베기 죽던디 된 거야디 데스다지 개침부러지면 나사버지메디 쇼저서럽지 쉬엘라 지도 단다 변난기 미즈 삼로 땅조당 내법도 저 돌아가서 대비나 항상 거에 원내지 제수이랑 쇼거에 내법지 요들 잠바 때 람상 지기 돈에 비밀이 예줘야다 디 칼라카보레 성도 시주도라 교바 쪽이 여다 매다 하바도에 다니도와 단대잖아 기고지 시진벨라 소베기 미리기 시주다 자뉴미리토라 송시안나샤바 두즈토라 데비나 지금 레와에 여대베서로지 다행 예배찰라 산에 사도게 라다치에기 내밥라 데비 있나니 어떠서 간제 있나 삼브르지 이무고에기 내주서로부터인데 가서 참에 통대에다 시대에 내주나로 용대기 여봐 하바드에 내지 도난 중부지라 대니 자날라 신진 시진비기 숭셰 전유미리다 미리길레던 거라 남바디토라 편난기 지 당연 겸바당 레제 수르바 제바드족이 따당르고 직심기도 디나라 망아디기 디저와 첨부지 지금 시주랑게 돈에 람산지 교도 첨부 맞진바 이네 락다게 돈에 된데 교바지 용거레스 안두저 달라지 저 장매양 코리오 로마스나 디치 야부지 고야라 지 락다 제바갈라 답 대부지 간에 조투비알라 삼로 땅고레스 제제 된데기 공부 여대니 망아직도 가시기 다 될려버시다 제여 말에 학과뒤 단대 롱아젠 당부디 나로라 저와 제여 말에 자나 나로라 베메세베다 압수만디베 능구기 녀다다 탑저여레 학과뒤 꼭사를 송기 내주디 겜베 다 압수만디베 내다로 차로 지게여레 진짜 윤지 잠바 표든 토라 강에 세당 교바지 땅에 공부 여비이니 텔람상치 막에 밥투베디 카부시다레스 다 텔레 맞제 니버디 몽벨로 주제 디나라 맞제 니버디 나로라 아니야 다야치어레 견나나라 행자보다 야부로 주나 시제 단데 신세서로베 있나 야나기 고지 탱아 중만 용외 래 하가다 왕자 상마 여대버지 친구 돈에 여대버 간지 돈에 여대버지를 문제 직교지 난데기 어르데 있나야 내단데 배 가고 인데버지 예배잘라 좀디 tin데 나리 다 단대지 제당다 레당 또 상마 야나 볼루게기 나델라 조레세럽든데 지게 개버든데 든데 지도가 다 뜻으로한다 이나면한테 간다 마찬가 도난 제거하기 내다로지 근데스레 섬기도 저점바디 다직 수수기 다당으로 지그제 님시번 넘어서 토빈수야다 가보르레데 수수 다다란테 자베기 차르고디 예선슈야로 지 제안이 벽이 슈야라 담에직 죽돔신의 민도 수수 통주로부디 지 tenji kongdu shiva nashingre, nambat sama konglo shunshin resha, an nyamshi se lega di, le lawa chi maare, ane chik nyuguda te, nezu ka teme che je, de guaya chi, yinba yindu zamba di nyug sun che, ing che je, tonang che je, chosem kyo ngane che tuwe che la, nambat sama shuk yongore, samsara ngare di, byugu shugu yo, an lakwa duye ta nyamshi ki, 즉 튼제 차샤게나 대장원에 배부르지 레샤 칸에 때베이네 즉 가사칸에 죽주 여대버고 제범 제좀 망고 여대버고 튼제 여대 잠바 남만다 마다 답대고 인도 안직 땅아람 참에 지존나로라 대가 대베 롱압 중앙단디 자다자다 안에 계제 다 강라 강조로 제제 레제 참마 침벌에 다 다자 안달지 소소소 레게 강라 직치 당 켈레바 체토에게 공부다 삼로 당고에 대해 개침물에 당가랑 결기 삼로라 지기 있나 냠시디 직주랑게 올레 메베톤에 베데 라완 쳔바지 파게 인디펜던스 아니 튀겐다 지조선도 상망아 저런가로 가시지른가 흉근 난고 여비이네 디지 천대직 차투별라 부러부야 데스게 투별라 예지 등재 나래 지 봉건님시 제제 조투별라 진짜 지 중부 있나 아니 직대스 냠시 쳇도 덴버지 용구레 삼삼레 땡가 시종레 덴데콜로 쿠두 제 총대 이내 흉기 직소당 진정성의 레가디 람산지 코 트이도바나시 타초부지당 삼반나시 용토베지 가고시라로 봐. 그래서 덴제기 직 중부였나 데스지 카리네 차가 용구레 성도 대만도베 냠시버디 흉기 레제 임부제 디인디 흉기 레제기 직소지다 동바지 송고아레 랑조지 개고고야레 되고 직시레 지 직조나를 대비주 안 대당 소소란 얘기 냠시 지얘기 내법디 3년 나로라 게두르고 침바이나 강에 차그래라 냠시 양타바지 용구레 섬기매 주도 잠바 주저 달라 마음발량 콤바로 카르베도 시주 냠시 칸 랑기 톤네 즉 차시 사바라고 가르치는 두고에도 둘상마 지 공바자자야 시로나 세정에 비교다 잡지 쇼야인라 안 하바도에 터레 남버서 딜리네 제동안에 페브디 덴덴가지 대냠시바 여대버서 지 냠시 돌라 투나나의 용거래 안 남버서 다지리 지간지 제제 디톨 페비인데 양대 렉절레 덴데 용거래 파츠 안터레 정도 된제지 고지 난 토바당 지 남부 상마 정보 야부 제 페토베데 배야부 총샤 안 참말라 도지체스 제 쇼이 안게디 권제기 담시에스 내면도 디데 주드제 주 두초가지 제 쇼이 현다 믹스에 갈롭스에 서로부터인데 나 가연 쇼에메스 제제디 쇼이라 안 하고데데 선불라 나 그자 쇼숨브리 안톨로기 토능에 도지체스게 담데 디마슈네 데스 지 검식 돈에 야고 마데르 소리도 아닌 게 도지체스 주
Now we will begin with the formal sessions for the day. And for the first segment, we have talk by Mr. Christian Verma and Mr. Opi Cannon. Mr. Verma will talk on expanding relations between India and China. And Mr. Cannon will talk on the Foundation for Nonviolent Alternatives. So we have 20 minutes each. So let me give a brief introduction to Mr. Verma. Mr. Christian Verma joined the Indian Civil Service in 1977 and superannuated from the post of Special Secretary to the Government of India in September 2012. During a distinguished career of 35 years with several key assignments, both within the country and abroad, dealing with policy, security, and development-related issues. He developed expertise on China, regional developments in the Far East, Korea, Southeast Asia, the Pacific and Indian Ocean region. Since 2012, Mr. Verma has been engaged in giving talks on China and security issues at various conferences and seminars. With this, the floor is yours.
Would you like him to come there or speak from here? A very good morning to you all. Let me start by stating that it's a great privilege and an honor, in fact, to have been invited by the Tibetan Policy Institute, and I owe a special thanks to Mr. Thupten Samphel, and of course, an old and respected friend, if I may call him that, Kalon Nodup, who I have known for many years, and every time I've met him, I've only learned something more about the area that I've been dealing with for many, many years. It's a humbling experience really to be here amongst what I think is a galaxy of scholars and academics. I'm neither a scholar or an academic. I'm just a simple practitioner of something which I have been very passionate about ever since I joined the civil service, and that is the study of China. and linked with the study of China, one can never have it complete unless you understand Tibet. And this has been something which, through my years of experience, I have tried to study as far as possible. I have had the opportunity to live in China for many years. I have visited Tibet these 2 occasions on extended tours. And so it's a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about is really not coming out from books or from written text, but something that has come through experience of being able to watch, to talk, to interact with people. And I think that itself is, I consider, a great singular sort of learning experience which does not really come from academics. So let me try and throw some ideas at you, and please feel free to interrupt if you so do like, or you want to save some questions till the end of my talk. I'll be happy to answer whatever queries you might have. With my very limited, I don't think it's actually virtually non-existent understanding of the language, but I did hear from talking about Xi Jinping, and I'm sure he referred to the latest developments which have taken place in the recently concluded, well, not recently concluded, still going on, at the NPC and the CPPCC. There are references, again, on India, which have been coming constantly by the Chinese leadership. Since I would say for the last 10 years, there has been a very different kind of approach with the Chinese. On the one hand, I think both China and India understand that we are 2 large neighbors. We are geostrategically and geoeconomically linked to each other. We need to deal with each other. We need to work with each other, and without being antagonistic necessarily in areas where there are problems. When I sit and talk to our friends in China, they seem to have some problems with India. We look at it from our point of view all the time, but I've tried to see from their angle, from their perspective, what exactly how do they deal with India? How do they view India? And invariably, Tibet comes up. And this is something which they consider as a very, very major obstacle in the development of relation between China and India. Then I think at a slightly second level is perhaps the territorial disputes in areas other than abutting Tibet. And a third point that is coming up from their point of view is really our India's foreign policy of virtual non-alignment, even a dead term, but still relevant in some ways. They seem to see you as a large democratic country and therefore ideologically different from them, a country which is diverse in many ways and absorbent of many different cultures, languages, religion, etc., something which they have not been able to work with very easily, and therefore they look at you as a competitor and a rival in that area. Following from that is the way they look at you in the foreign policy environment. They look at you as somebody who is close to the Americans, close to the West, having tremendous amount of interaction, trade, and ties with them. And they also fear, somewhere behind them, their minds, is the fact that who knows that you might one day align with them and become hostile to China and do what they consider a counter-encirclement of China. We talk about string of pearls, they also talk about the string of pearls. So these are some of the areas where I felt that the Chinese, this is how they look at India in many ways. On our side, of course, you would all know, having been here for so many years, that India looks at China as a huge neighbor. Two countries which are intertwined with a lot of historical legacy, starting from the religious angle, right from Buddhism, from here, went there. We have collaborated, there's been a lot of travelers, there is a lot of cultural exchanges, there have been a tremendous amount of interaction historically. As we became from independence virtually at the same time that they became independent, and so did we, there has been relationships, initially very close relationships, but then we got into some troubled waters again. It happened to be over Tibet and some of the other issues in terms of personalities clashes between Mao Zedong and how he looked at the new Congress epitomized by Jawaharlal Nehru and the other congressional leaders. So we went into territorial disputes. There was a problem. I'm not going to go into the history of all these things, but I'm sure all of you already know these things. But let me throw a few ideas about how we are doing, where we are going. We've had several rounds of talks. We haven't made much progress in terms of settling the boundary issue, or even drawing parameters, even drawing the guiding principles. They're all there, but more in terms of theory, in terms of terminology, rather than implementation and execution on the ground. So those have remained, I would say, some obstacles in the relationship and the growing of this relationship. On the other hand, I think the two countries, with their mature leaderships, and I think it started with Deng Xiaoping on the Chinese side, who began to see India as somebody they need to deal with, somebody they need to negotiate with. Then I think there was a period of relative lull. It wasn't as if they were reaching out tremendously for you at that time, even though Hu Yaopang and others were very humanistic and humanitarian in their approach, and a little spiritual too. But I don't think they could really spark off this relationship. But come Jiang Zemin in the 90s, we felt that he wanted to look at India in a different way, and came this visit and the drawing up of various treaties about maintaining peace and tranquility, trying to keep the outstanding issue of disputes on the border in the back burner, and going ahead with identifying mutual areas of interest and trying to develop those in a changing world scenario. This thread was continued through the years, and now I'm jumping a stage because nothing very much happened in Hu Jintao's time. He was a bit of a hardliner as far as Tibet was concerned, and therefore there was always a problem in trying to get through. Also a more conservative, more orthodox kind of an individual. But with the coming of this present leadership, let me just go back for a second. While Hu Jintao was on that, I think Wen Jiabao was of a different metal. I think he understood the requirement and the need for working with India, and being a person who was rooted and completely well versed with economy and economic development. He saw areas of opportunity, and he began to articulate these areas of opportunities in the economic field, not only bilaterally, but also regionally, trans-regionally, and then internationally. I think it was right across the board. They started identifying areas where India and China could actually cooperate with each other, and therefore bring about an environment which was conducive to actually begin to address the outstanding issues in a much more objective and a concrete way. Wen Jiabao, I think for some of these reasons, let me share this with you. I used to be in government at that time. We felt that he was a little out of sync with the rest of the Chinese leadership. They didn't like the way he came up and made some assertions in India during his visits about improving relations, about trying to solve the boundary problem in a definitive time frame, etc. It didn't go down very well with Beijing. And there were reports that maybe Wen Jiabao was even called in and told that he had overstepped the limits. But with Xi Jinping, things began to change. I think he is bold, he is assertive, he is very Chinese in the sense that he would assert sovereignty. He would make sure that territorial integrity is never transgressed. So he's coming from a mold of a very powerful, dominating leader who, in his first sweep, Jiang Zemin waited 2 years to become chairman of the Central Military Commission. Here is a man who, after many years, just took in all three portfolios, the highest there, and began to run the country. on the international field, and that's where India comes in, he wants to give an impression or at least work towards a good neighborly policy, being friendly, being able to sort of dilute the antagonistic factors which are bedeviling relations with the neighbors, especially India, but at the same time seeking more economic cooperation, trying to see what are the areas that they can work together with. He's also focused domestically in a great way. I think they have launched the anti-corruption campaign. He's going about it like no other Chinese leader in the past has gone. They have actually reached the highest levels. Politburo members, standing committee members of the Politburo have been arraigned. So I think he is pursuing that. And during that period of looking inwards and cleaning up the economy, cleaning up the political system, as well as dealing with the outcome of a slowing economy, which can cause a lot of turmoil in the Chinese polity, economy, and the social fabric. I think he has a lot of challenges back home. So in that scenario, he is nevertheless beginning to reach out, and I think 2 or 3 visits that have taken place in the recent past, starting from Wang Yi, who is a very moderate and a very forward-looking foreign minister. He also was out in the dumps for a while. He was sent off to Japan after he was in for one of the main sort of propellants, if I may use the word, on Chinese foreign policy, has come back into play. He knows India. He understands India very well. His visit has been very good. Our visit, foreign minister's visit to China recently, has also been very good. I think they have come up with understanding each other in a much more positive way. So I think there is a lot of scope for the expansion of these ties. The landmark visit, I think, both of Li Keqiang, when he came in soon after Mr. Modi and the new government took power in India, was a signal to us that the Chinese are willing to look at everything. Everything's on the table, and they're willing to look at it afresh and in a very positive way. And I think we responded not in a weak need or a sort of overwhelming way, but we were frank. We were also able to articulate our own difficulties with them very candidly. And I think this is a sign of a maturing relationship, where there are areas of competition, rivalry, but there are areas of cooperation. And I think the world is large enough for these 2 countries to get together and start doing things in a much better way than has been done in the past. I think when Xi Jinping came, I think it was a major breakthrough in the relationship. Forget about all the diplomatic niceties about being in Gujarat and making all the statements, etc. But I think they were able to identify 4 or 5 very critical areas which will actually direct the future of China-India relations. Areas of economy, economic development, and trade. The fact that the Chinese are looking at investing about $20 billion over the next 5 years in developing industrial parks, looking at special economic zones, looking at actually making manufacturing units based in India, cooperation in the IT sector, in the ITES sector, the cooperation, I think, more strategically in the areas of the railways. And now we are looking at possibilities of Chinese investment and Chinese participation and transfer of technology in certain areas in the infrastructure field. I think these are all areas which have been identified, and they are going forward. And during President Xi Jinping's visit, all these were actually agreements have been signed on these subjects. So it actually behoves of a pretty good future. These are all on the positive side. While this is all going on, we cannot forget the fact that the Central Party School, the ideologues in the Chinese Communist Party, I think epitomized really, led by Professor Chin Wei, if I don't know whether you've known. She's a faculty member of the Central Party School. She has been taking a lot of interest in Tibet, has been talking about Tibet, has been talking about ways and means to try and reach out and start a new dialogue. So it looks like the Chinese, as far as Tibet is concerned, are really looking at some new initiatives in trying to either resume talks or give some kind of signals to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and others in the Tibetan polities abroad about moving ahead. But we have yet to see where they go and anything concrete coming out of some of these statements which are being made. I think it seems like something is happening there. They have also diluted their criticism, the overt criticism and the bad language that was used against His Holiness. But at the same time, they do come up with articles time and again, muted definitely when compared to the earlier times, where they do talk about hostility and talk about the clique, etc., etc. So this remains. So when I enunciated to you the initial 3 or 4 irritants, I think this still remains. We have yet to see any concrete movement on the Chinese side on this particular issue. And unless that happens, I don't think anything will actually move forward in the territorial issued disputes as a resolution, because I think these are very closely linked. So if you put those two aside, they are now beginning to get more wary about what happened with the US and President Obama's visit. There were several articles in the Chinese media and several utterances by their leaders where they expressed and revealed a tremendous sense of concern about India's so-called cozying up with the Americans. They haven't liked the idea of the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement having going forward and the Liability Act being sorted out. They instantly went to their closest ally and all-weather friend Pakistan and promised them instantly many nuclear reactors and more aid and more help, assistance, and gave us signals that they will block us in getting into the bigger bodies which are dealing with nuclear proliferation, Wassenaar and Australia Group, etc. So there were all that kind of thing that has been hinted by the Chinese. We also saw some incidents on the border, which were just prior to, during Xi Jinping's visit, and thereafter, some limited transgressions and, in fact, lengthening occupation, if I may use that word very loosely, don't misunderstand, but it's just a sort of getting there and sitting there longer than not usual till we were able to persuade them to go back and try and maintain the current line of control and peace and tranquility on the border without any incursions and transgression and incidents on the border. While I'm talking about this, let me also mention to you that there is a concern, of course, in India where we are looking at a much more assertive Chinese policy and Chinese moves on the India-Tibet border. I'm deliberately using that phrase. I hope we understand the sense of that. It's the India-Tibet border as far as we are concerned. And they have been not only more assertive, but there has also been some aggressive moves in those areas. And I personally, and this is coming out personally from my own perception, not from any other quarter, is that when two soldiers who are bristling with arms and weapons confront each other so closely and begin to push each other back from their territory, there's always a possibility of something taking place. Somebody just fired, let's go, of a bullet. It hasn't happened for many years. I think it's been last 40 years. There's been no firing in those areas. But there is always a possibility of somebody taking an initiative, just going crazy and doing something like that. So it's something that we are trying to handle. I think the Government of India and the PRC understand this issue, and there have been several agreements that have come into place which are confidence building, as well as trying to envisage a border mechanism where we could discuss with each other and actually mute or at least curtail any such incidents or the possibility of any such incidents. The Chinese have also been following, well, around Obama's visit and before in the ASEAN as well as the East Asia Summit. They have not taken very kindly to India's assertions on the South China Sea. This has been a bit of a problem. I think also the talk about a trans-Pacific partnership where India will participate, where they are talking about the linkages of the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean, are issues which are sources of what would I say, not disagreement or concern, but something which is coming new to the table for the Chinese in terms of bilateral relations with India. They have sent veiled warnings to India about so-called meddling in the South China Seas, about trying to get across into that territory. It has been more or less, I think we've addressed those concerns. We have said that we observe the right of passage and we would abide by international law. And as far as international law is being honored and respected by any country in any littoral area, India is supportive of such initiatives. So we are not really looking at challenging China there. We're not looking at challenging China's interests in areas which belong to it. But certainly, when it comes to freedom of international navigation, freedom of the seas, I think India is going to be a very strong votary in this region. So what we are looking at, let me sum up very quickly, is a China and India, which is where China is slowly getting to terms with more domestic issues, and especially trying to manage a slowing down of a very rapid economy and the fallout of those economies in terms of unemployment, in terms of possibilities of disturbances and a little bit of, I wouldn't say a large-scale destabilization, but some unrest and some restiveness in provinces. We are seeing that. And at the same time, they're seeing in India a very growing and a very bold leadership, one which is willing to go out of and think out of the box and make new initiatives to try and resolve issues. And they are looking at a much more determined India with a very stable leadership and with a great mandate to be able to take decisions in areas of foreign policy. So there is going to be a time when I see that we would be talking to each other much more frankly and trying to resolve disputes rather than putting them on the back burner. While saying this, I think there are going to be much more exchanges of people, of trade. There's already a relaxation on the visas on arrivals, which India is coming. They're coming on the tourist map for India. We are going to be talking to each other on climate changes. We're going to look at environmental issues. We're looking at biodiversity, even save the tiger, if you please, conservation, etc. There are many areas, drug menace and stuff like that, at counter-terrorism. I should have mentioned that earlier. Many areas of commonality and mutual cooperation. I think you're going to see much more of that as India and China go ahead in the next couple of years. Thank you very much. I think I'm all right with time. In case there are questions now, you could ask them. If you want to save them for later, by all means. But thank you very much.
It's very illuminating to hear from you, especially for me, as I'm researching on India-China relations. So it was very, very helpful to me. And as a moderator, I'm a little biased. I've let you speak a little more. So in of course, we'll have the question and answer after Mr. Tanton's talk. So in this second half of the segment, we have Mr. Opi Tanton, who will, as a member trustee of the Foundation for Nonviolent Alternatives, will give an introduction to the foundation. And I think like Mr. Opi, I believe like Mr. Opi Tanton, being a very long time supporter of the Tibetan people, is a very familiar face to this audience, and I believe like he does not need much introduction. Mr. Tanton has a long experience in managing cultural and educational institutions of national importance, and in particular, I think for this audience,
you may remember that he has been instrumental in setting up the Tibetan Parliamentary and Policy Research Center. So with this very, very brief introduction, sir, the floor is yours.
Coming to Dharamshala is just like coming to my second home. Since I was involved after my retirement from the Banaras Hindu University to set up a center, research center for the cause of the Tibetan movement, which was named as Tibetan Parliament and Policy Research Center. That was way back in 1993 and 94. And since then, I have been visiting Dharamshala. I can't, it's a countless number, maybe 25 times or 30 times or so. So it's just like my second home. Even while I was in Banaras, the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies was coming up, and Professor Samdong Rinpoche was first the principal, then the director, and then finally, when we could elevate that institution as a deemed university, then he was the vice chancellor of the university. So I had long association with him, never of course feeling that I shall have an opportunity to work for the cause of the Tibetans, but then ultimately it worked like that. So that is how the TPPRC was established. Now in TPPRC, what we did was to acquaint the Tibetans, young and old, who had come here, to know as to what is their status as far as international politics is concerned, what is their own political history, because mainly the Tibetan community has been more of a cultural and religious community, but not so much of political history. So right in the beginning we started bringing out small booklets, say, on the history of Tibet. The second important publication was about the democratic movement of the Tibetans. And the third was on the future of Tibet. So these were three small booklets which were initially brought out to make people, the Tibetan community, understand their own country, their own people, their own status vis-a-vis China and the international law, etc. Then, of course, we started working on the His Holiness political philosophy, and we were able to bring about three major publications on his select speeches and writings and on his political philosophy. So the entire thing was oriented in a way that you can make the Tibetan community know about themselves very well, and the others also to understand the Tibetans really well. That was the beginning of it. Then, of course, there was the Tibetans were trained to take over. After me, a number of Tibetans who were trained, they took over as the director of TPPRC. There was one Shering Somo, who used to be the president of the Tibetan Women Congress. Then the present speaker of the Parliament, Tibetan Parliament, was also he also took over TPPRC, etc. Then there was, of course, a break, but we always remained associated with the core causes of the Tibetans. There were many associations, so we were all associated with it, but not working for it as such. Then about 7-8 years before, we found that there was a drift in the policy of the German Foundation, which was actually helping the TPPRC and many other areas in the work. So my counterpart in the foundation, the Norman Foundation, Frederick Norman Foundation, Rebon Banerjee, whose name must be equally or rather much better known to all of you here. So she being there, so felt it that there was a very sharp drift in the policy of the foundation as regards China, because they were not able to get through them, and China was also threatening them that if you continue with this, then we will not have any kind of relation such. And finally it happened like that. They were not able, their own office in Beijing was closed, and with all the possible efforts, the changes in the policy towards Tibet, they were not able to open their own office again in Beijing. So in this way they were also hurt. But then the TPPRC finally was suffering on this count. So we started thinking as to whatever work has been done by TPPRC, it should not be allowed to just lose ground completely. And then again I and Rebon started discussing also with Professor Samdong Rinpoche that how do we carry the task in a more defined manner, not only speeches or lectures or here and there, but in a very defined manner so that the presence is felt. So finally we came to think in terms of setting up another institution which is known as Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives. Even considering the name, it was quite a difficult task, because the moment you bring the word non-violence, you immediately go to Buddha or also to Gandhi in the contemporary terms, or Nelson Mandela and others, etc. So we didn't want that kind of a passive, what you call it, satyagraha or that thing, right? But then, you see, trying to understand the alternative strategies, which externally in the form of non-violence, but they can go deeper into the cause and then generate enough awareness in the people about the causes which need to be addressed properly. So that in 2009, January, it's now more than 6 years, we were able to establish foundation, and since we were very few at that moment, so instead of a society, etc., we established it as a trust under the Indian Trust Act. It's a not-for-profit organization. So we started working, and then immediately we came to what shall be. Broadly we had said that we will be working in the region of South Asia. And then these two powers, both China and India, were rising. Anything, of course, China was going on by leaps and bounds, and India was way behind. But anyway, these two remained the great powers in this region. But because of our background, we made India, Tibet, China as the focus of our own working. And that way we thought that we kept the politics as such at the backbench and came forward in taking up subjects or themes which are of common concern. They were a matter of concern for China, for Tibet, for India, and many other countries also. So then we decided to have a kind of a scheme of the things known as regional dialogues. And amongst regional dialogues, we first took up a subject on the river waters, because most of the important rivers are flowing out of the Tibetan plateau, including the Brahmaputra. So we decided to have the scholars in China mainland who have also been working in this area, and then the Tibetan scholars, and the scholars from India, and also a number of scholars who were working from other parts of the globe. So they were kind of good China watchers and with very sound background. So way back in 2011, we organized one of the regional dialogues and on the river waters in Asia. What is the perspective and what were the challenges? So we were able to get 3 Chinese scholars coming from the mainland. That was in a way a great achievement considered, because otherwise you are getting dissident Chinese, etc., quite often for many, but not from the mainland and from the formal organizations set up by the Chinese government. So then from the Tibetan, amongst the Tibetan scholars, there was Tenzin Norbu, who was working on that subject area, and a number of them from India, etc. And that was considered as quite a successful conference, because we had all the countries from the upper riparian, middle riparian, lower riparian states. Even those countries were involved in the Mekong River Commission. They were also invited. So it was a very well attended conference. And finally, it also issued a statement as to what should be our way forward. So that was one major. Then after that, we used to have periodically number of issues to be discussed, which were kind of confidence building programs. And on the Tibetan establishment would be what is the state of affairs in Tibet. And when the new setup came up in China, then we thought that there is a possibility of developing some kind of alternative policies to be working together. So we have always been thinking in terms of providing a kind of a platform where all the stakeholders are brought up without any prejudice or anything of that kind, and they work only very, very scientific and technical manner on the subject. So that has been the main aim of the Foundation for Nonviolent Alternative. And in that regard, we organized a number of programs. Amongst that, the other program, the important thing was the study of the Himalaya, including the Tibetan Plateau. So the title of this seminar was Tibet's relation with the Himalayas. So we thought that we'll try to cover the entire Himalayan, bordering with India. So we had 3 seminars actually under that. The first was held in Ladakh, Leh. Then we organized a kind of a core of the scholars who have been working on various aspects of the Himalaya, and then have the scholars from the region itself. So the first was held in Leh, Ladakh in 2012. Then we had another one at Gangtok in Sikkim, and the third one was held at Itanagar in Arunachal Pradesh. Now when we were going to Arunachal Pradesh, a small group of about 8 persons, the Chokla, he was also there, and some students from Sikkim, and a very senior diplomat from the Foreign Service, Ambassador Ranjit Gupta, he also accompanied us. And we traveled right across up to Tawang, Bumla, all those places before coming to Itanagar, in order to see things for ourselves and have our own perception about the place, what has been done, how much development actually has taken place, what has not been done. So all those things. So then we had the final seminar there. Now those papers, of course, it took quite some time to collect the papers, etc. But we are now almost at a stage where we will go take these papers for printing. Then another major seminar we took on the state of ecology in the Tibetan Plateau, because environment has always been a big issue, and it is a big issue for all the stakeholders, and particularly for our country also, because any climatic change taking place on the Tibetan Plateau is bound to impact not only the close neighbors but other parts of the globe also. This was held only in 2014 March. Again, we were able to this time have as many as 5 scholars coming from China, and one of them happened to be a scholar who had come for the earlier conference also. So that gave us confidence that the Chinese government is also taking up these things in proper perspective for the purpose of scholarly interaction, and not, because otherwise you see the Chinese scholars would not have been allowed to come, but then as many as 5 came, then some Tibetans also. Of course, we felt that there should have been a greater strength of the Tibetan scholars interacting in these things, but that has not been the case. And we discussed it with Thupten Samphel also, other persons, that it is absolutely necessary to have a large number of research scholars, Tibetans working in this area, so that the Chinese, when they are invited, they can also feel that the Tibetan people are themselves interested in what is happening the third pole, or you can call it the reservoir of the water on the Tibetan plateau itself. So that is one thing where I think TPI and the TA also has to concentrate, so that there are a number of scholars who are taking up the environment or the ecological issues or climatic changes issues, because that remains a matter of great concern. So this is how we went along, and every third or fourth month, whenever we come to know that anybody who has been working in this field from any country is also invited by FNVA, and then there is an interaction amongst people just to generate better awareness as to what kind of development is taking place, how the people are thinking about it, what actions are being taken, etc. Because there are many things which are quite, let's say, disturbing for us, particularly in terms of the dams that are being built up in the China, and as the reports come, that it may also affect the flow of the water in the Brahmaputra area. So these are issues which need to be solved in one way or the other, with the main stakeholders sitting across the table, and not only through public discourses, etc. And another important thing that we took up was that we went into, I think, a kind of a policy brief as to what should be the government of India's policy towards Tibet and the changing. We have to have good relations with China, because you can't choose your neighbors. China is there, your neighbor. So you have to develop areas, etc., and people, so that they can understand each other's causes in a better manner. So then we started working on it, and finally it took us about a year, and we consulted large number of people from the Foreign Ministry, from the bureaucracy in general, from water experts, from environmentalists, etc. And then finally we prepared a document which must have been seen by you, Reappraisal of India's Tibet Policy. So that was a major document prepared by FNVA, and we gave it to the Ministry of External Affairs. It was quite appreciative. Mr. Verma also was involved in a way. So in this way, FNVA has been trying, to cover quite a large area of interaction, where China also all the time is coming on the table, and then all other stakeholders are coming. Now, in this area, we have again now take up a big area for working. That is the mapping of the entire Himalayas, including the Tibetan plateau. And of course we have prepared the project, etc., but it requires a lot of funding, and it has been submitted to various agencies, both in our country, to the government, and also to other foundations which help you to work in these areas. So that is a big issue, so that whatever has been done earlier and whatever needs to be done is all brought about in a kind of a showcasing in one window. You pick up a very important place, and then immediately you come to know about its history, culture, flora, fauna, other specialties about that particular region, etc. And in this way you can have maps which will provide you practically all the knowledge that is available on it. But there is always an opportunity to go further beyond it, but whatever has been done and needs to be done should be taken up. It will also be very helpful for the purpose of defense forces once you come to know about all the places in a big comprehensive manner. So we are trying to see that this project is approved and we have the necessary finances to start working on it. So that will provide a great opportunity for the. Now, as far as Tibet's relation with the Himalayas are concerned, there was a kind of a undercurrent idea also. But besides the working on it, we are all the time thinking that once all the scholars come up into last 200, 300, 400 years relationship of Tibet with various Himalayan states or the people, that will provide us a knowledge whether China at all came in connection with Tibet during the previous years, because China always claims that Tibet has been a part and parcel of the mainland right from times immemorial. So even though this is not a kind of a direct point which we have taken up for study, but when you go through various issues, it automatically will come up whether there was any relationship of that kind with China, or whether China was having Tibet as one of its own part of the mainland, as they say. So this thing also be quite clear from a different point of view. Now this has been in a way the functional framework of FNVA. Mr. Verma is also one of our trustees. It's a very, very small unit. When we write FNVA team, it means only 3 or 4 persons who have been working on it. But even then, I think considering the physical strength, the output has not been that small. We have been able to carry forward quite a lot, because there is a lot of, kind of a sympathetic feeling for the cause, which helps us also a lot in taking up our goal and our objective. So in a way TPPRC has been finally closed now, but with the Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives coming up, this kind of work has been going on, and we hope that it shall go on also. Now, if any one of you wants to know anything in particular, then I will of course be very happy to help you.